My name is Olivia Montgomery, and I need to tell you something that's been eating away at me for 3 years now. Something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Something that changed everything I believed about family, about loyalty, and about what it truly means to be loved. I'm sitting here in my apartment in Portland, Oregon, and I'm finally ready to share this story with you because I think you deserve to know what happened that night at the Verdant Room, the most expensive restaurant in the Pacific Northwest. I think you deserve to understand what it feels like when the people who brought you into this world suddenly make you feel like a complete stranger to them. And before we dive deeper into this, I need to tell you something. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Olive Revenge Stories, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. The thing about being the oldest child in a family like mine is that nobody ever tells you it's a job. Nobody explains that you're signing up to be the responsible one, the fixer, the person who steps up when things fall apart. I grew up in Seattle, in a beautiful house on Green Lake, with parents who seemed to have it all figured out. My father, Richard, was a software engineer at Microsoft. My mother, Susan, was a homemaker who threw the most elaborate dinner parties you've ever seen. She was the kind of woman who could make a Thanksgiving feast look like it appeared on the cover of Martha Stewart Living. And then there were my siblings. My brother, Marcus, who was 2 years younger than me, was the golden boy. He was handsome, charismatic, and people just gravitated toward him. And then there was my sister, Lauren, the youngest, who was 4 years my junior. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made other women jealous and men stumble over their words. Growing up, I didn't resent them for it. At least, not at first. I was 17 when I realized my parents had different expectations for each of us. I was supposed to be smart, hardworking, and independent. I was supposed to figure things out on my own. I was supposed to be the one who didn't need help, the one who could take care of herself. Meanwhile, Marcus was being groomed for success, getting expensive tutoring, being driven to debate competitions across 3 states. And Lauren? Lauren was being prepared to be beautiful, to be charming, to be the kind of woman who could marry well and never have to worry about money. I got a part-time job at 16 to pay for my own college preparation courses. I studied for the SAT in the library until they closed at 9 p.m. because I needed to get a scholarship. I worked 3 different jobs throughout high school to save money for college. My parents praised my work ethic, but they never once offered to help. When I got accepted to University of Washington with a partial scholarship, they threw me a small dinner. When Marcus got into Stanford on a full ride, they rented a private event space and invited half of Seattle. I learned quickly that love in my family wasn't equal. Love was conditional. Love was based on how much you could accomplish with the least amount of help. Love was something you had to earn. By the time I turned 22, I had worked my way through university, graduated with honors in business administration, and landed a decent job at a marketing firm. I was living in my own apartment, paying my own bills, and finally feeling like I had some control over my life. My mother would call me every Sunday, and she would tell me how proud she was of my independence. But there was always something underneath those words, something that sounded a lot like pity. She would say things like, "It must be so hard doing it all on your own," or "I don't know how you manage without family help." What she didn't say was, "We could help if we wanted to. We choose not to." The pattern that would eventually lead to that night at the Verdant Room started small. It started with little financial emergencies. My father's business had a rough quarter, they said. Could I help with my mother's medical bills? They weren't major surgeries, nothing life-threatening, but apparently my mother's insurance didn't cover everything. I was making $48,000 a year. I paid $2,000 of that toward my mother's medical bills. My mother never paid me back. Then it was Marcus. He had gotten into Stanford, yes, but his graduate program required him to move to Silicon Valley immediately. Did I know anyone in the Bay Area? Actually, they asked, could I help with his first month's rent? He couldn't start his job for another 6 weeks, and they didn't have the liquid capital to cover it. I gave Marcus $3,000. He was always going to pay me back, he said. He never did. Then it was Lauren. She had gotten into USC for communications, but the dorms were full, and she needed to live off campus. Could I help her secure an apartment? They needed a cosigner. I co-signed for an $18,000 lease. By the time I was 26 years old, I had given my family over $35,000. Not as gifts, as loans that were never repaid, as emergencies that somehow always required my sacrifice. I didn't have anyone to help me. I never had anyone to fall back on. But somewhere along the line, I had become the fallback for everyone else. When I met James 3 years ago, he was the first person who seemed genuinely shocked by this arrangement. We were on our second date, having coffee at a little place in Ballard, and I made the mistake of mentioning that I was sending money to my parents for home repairs. James put his cup down and looked at me like I had just told him I was planning to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops. "Wait," he said. "You're sending the money? Don't they have jobs?" I remember laughing nervously. I remember trying to explain that it was complicated, that my mother had stopped working years ago to raise us, that my father's income wasn't what it used to be. James listened, and then he said something that I had never heard anyone say before. "Olivia, that's not complicated. That's not love. That's manipulation." James became my person after that. He was the one who helped me see that the pattern wasn't normal. He was the one who started asking the difficult questions that no one in my family wanted to answer. He was the one who suggested that maybe, just maybe, I had the right to expect something from my family besides guilt and empty promises. In the months before that birthday dinner, things had reached a breaking point. I had finally said no. I had finally drawn a line. Marcus had asked for money again, and I had said no. My mother had mentioned an upcoming vacation to Italy, and when she hinted that they couldn't quite afford it, I had said no. It felt like I was suffocating, like I had been underwater for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to breathe. My therapist, Dr. Morrison, had been working with me on setting boundaries. She kept saying that the most important thing was to recognize my own worth, to understand that I was not responsible for my family's choices. She kept saying that love without respect is just another word for control. And I was starting to believe her. Which is why, when my mother called me on a Friday afternoon in March and asked if I could make it to Marcus's birthday dinner, I almost said no. I almost found an excuse. I almost protected myself from what I somehow already knew was coming. But I said yes. I said yes because I was still hoping that maybe, just maybe, my family had realized their mistake. I said yes because I still believed in the possibility that they loved me as much as I loved them. I said yes because at my core, despite everything, I was still the dutiful daughter who showed up when it mattered. The Verdant Room is this impossibly expensive restaurant where they serve food that looks like art and costs more than most people's monthly rent. It's the kind of place where the lighting is deliberately dim, where the waiters wear white gloves, where everything about the experience screams exclusivity and wealth. My mother had made the reservation for 8 people. There was my mother, Susan, who showed up in a Chanel dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. There was my father, Richard, looking uncomfortable in a sport coat that was slightly too tight. There was Marcus, the birthday boy, looking absolutely radiant in that way that people do when they're about to start an exciting new chapter. There was Lauren, stunning as always in a black cocktail dress that made everyone in the restaurant turn to look at her. There was James, my fiancé, who was trying his best to be charming and supportive despite the obvious tension that he could feel radiating off me. There were 2 of my mother's friends, both dressed to the nines, both looking like they were about to be treated to the dinner of the century. And then there was me. I wore a navy dress that I had bought on sale at Nordstrom Rack. I wore my hair down because I knew my mother preferred it that way. I wore the forced smile that I had perfected over years of family gatherings, the one that said everything was fine, everything was normal, everything was exactly as it should be. The dinner started beautifully. The waiter brought champagne. My father made a toast about how proud he was of Marcus, about how his youngest son had accomplished so much and was about to accomplish so much more. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin and smiled at Marcus in that way she reserved only for him and Lauren. Marcus was glowing. He had just been offered a position at a venture capital firm, a position that came with a 6-figure salary and the kind of prestige that would set him up for life. My mother had already been telling her friends about it at church. I could tell because the way she looked at him now, the way she touched his arm, it was the look of a mother whose son had finally made her proud in the way that mattered. We ordered our food. Mine was a pan-seared halibut that tasted like absolute perfection. I should have enjoyed it. I should have let myself have that moment, that one small thing that was just for me. But I was too busy watching what was happening around the table. I was too busy noticing the way my mother kept steering the conversation toward Marcus's accomplishments, toward his future, toward all the things that he was going to do and be and achieve. She barely looked at me. When she did, it was with that same expression of polite interest that she might use when speaking to someone she had just met at a cocktail party. My father was the same way. He was too focused on impressing my mother's friends with stories about Marcus, about how intelligent he had always been, about how they had always known he was destined for greatness. Nobody asked me how work was going. Nobody asked about the promotion I had just gotten. Nobody asked about my engagement, about the future that James and I were planning together. I was invisible. I was the backdrop. I was the responsible one, the one who had it all figured out, the one who didn't need attention or celebration or recognition. I was the one who was supposed to just keep showing up and keep supporting everyone else. About halfway through the meal, my mother stood up. She had that look on her face, the one she got when she was about to make a grand statement. She clinked her wine glass with her fork, and the table gradually quieted down. She was going to make a toast, she announced. She had been waiting for this moment, she said. She was so incredibly proud, she said. And then she looked at Lauren, not Marcus, and she began to speak. When I look at my children, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, I see three very different people. I see my oldest daughter, Olivia, who has always been so independent, so capable, so strong. She has never needed us for anything, and that's beautiful in its own way. I felt James's hand find mine under the table. He squeezed it gently.
He was warning me.
He could sense what was coming. I see my son, Marcus, who is about to embark on an incredible journey. His future is so bright, so full of possibility. We are so proud of him.
She paused.
She turned to look directly at Lauren. But I see my youngest daughter, Lauren, and I see the daughter I am most proud of. I see a young woman who is beautiful, who is kind, who has a gift for making everyone around her feel special. In a world that often forgets to celebrate the things that truly matter, Lauren reminds us what's important. She reminds us that life is about connection, about beauty, about bringing joy to those we love. The table was silent. Even my father seemed surprised by this declaration. Lauren was blushing, looking down at her plate, playing the part of the modest beauty who had just been elevated to saint status by her mother. And I felt something inside of me break. I felt something that I had been holding together by sheer force of will and therapy and self-help books and affirmations, just completely shatter into a million pieces. I had spent my entire life trying to be worthy of my family's love. I had sacrificed everything, given everything, put myself aside for everyone else. And in the end, I was the independent one. I was the strong one. I was the one who didn't need love because I was too busy being self-sufficient. The dinner continued. We finished our meals. The waiter brought dessert, some kind of elaborate chocolate creation that tasted like ashes in my mouth. My mother was in an excellent mood now, basking in her own sense of having raised such extraordinary children. My father was telling jokes that nobody was really laughing at, but everyone was pretending to find hilarious. Marcus was on his third glass of champagne, looking like he didn't have a care in the world. Lauren was glowing, absolutely glowing, in the way that beautiful women glow when they have just been told that they are the favorite. And then the waiter came back. He came back with a leather folder, the kind they use for expensive restaurant bills. And he placed it directly in front of me. I looked at him. He offered no explanation. He simply placed the folder on the table and walked away. I stared at that folder for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 seconds. It was soft, expensive leather. It smelled like money. It smelled like presumption. It smelled like the same thing every emergency phone call had smelled like for the last 9 years. I opened it slowly. The total was $6,450 for 8 people at an expensive restaurant with expensive wine and expensive appetizers and expensive entrees and expensive desserts. $6,450. I looked up from the folder. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked at Marcus and Lauren. I looked at James, whose hand had gone completely rigid on the table next to mine. And I made a choice. I made a choice that would change everything. I closed the folder. I placed it gently in the center of the table. I stood up. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the table like thunder. "No." My mother's smile faded. "Olivia, I don't understand."
I'm not paying this, I said.
"I'm not paying for dinner. I'm not paying for Marcus's celebration. I'm not paying for any of it anymore." My father cleared his throat. "Olivia, let's not make a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm making a stand. I've spent 9 years giving money to this family. 9 years of sacrificing my own future for yours. 9 years of saying yes when I needed to say no. And I'm done. I'm completely done." The table had gone silent. My mother's friends were looking at each other with that delicious embarrassment that people get when they're witnessing a family drama that they have no business witnessing. The other diners in the restaurant were pretending not to notice, but of course they were noticing. Everyone was noticing. "You are making a scene," my mother said quietly. "You are embarrassing this family." "No," I said. "I have been embarrassing this family by pretending that this is normal. I have been embarrassing myself by allowing this to happen. But that ends tonight." I looked at Marcus. "Marcus, congratulations on your job. I'm genuinely happy for you. But I'm not paying for this dinner." I looked at Lauren. "Lauren, you are beautiful and kind and the favorite, and that's fine. That's your right as the youngest. But I'm not paying for this dinner to celebrate something that has never been celebrated for me." I looked at my mother. "And Mom, I love you. I have always loved you. But I am not responsible for your choices or your lifestyle or your inability to manage your finances. I am not a piggy bank. I am not your emergency fund. I am a person. I am a daughter. But I am not less than because I am independent and strong." I looked at my father. "And Dad, I have never once asked you to choose sides, but I need you to know that the way we are being treated is not okay." And then I looked at James. I looked at the man who had loved me enough to help me see this pattern, to help me understand my own worth, to help me believe that I deserved better. "I'm leaving," I said. "James, are you coming?" He didn't hesitate. He stood up immediately. He took my coat from the back of my chair. He took my hand, and we left. We walked out of the Verdant room, past the maitre d', past the host stand, past the line of people waiting for their reservations. We walked out into the cool Portland night, and we kept walking until we reached the parking garage. We got in James's car, and he didn't say anything. He just drove. He drove us to our favorite diner on Belmont Avenue, the one with the terrible coffee and the best pie in the city. We sat in a booth by the window, and he held my hand across the table.
And I started to cry.
I cried because I had finally said no. I cried because I had finally chosen myself. And I cried because I knew that everything with my family was about to change forever. The aftermath was chaos. My mother called me 17 times that night. She sent text messages that ranged from apologetic to vicious. She told me that I had humiliated her, that I had ruined Marcus's night, that I had proven that I was the selfish one all along. My father sent me an email the next morning demanding that I call my mother immediately and apologize. Marcus didn't contact me, but I heard through Lauren that he was calling around his friends, telling them the story, making me out to be the ungrateful daughter who had turned on her family out of spite. And Lauren, my beautiful, innocent youngest sister, sent me a message that said, "I can't believe you would do that to Mom. She only wanted a nice dinner." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Dr. Morrison. I went to see her the next day, and I sat in her office with a cup of tea, and I told her everything. I told her about the folder. I told her about the choice I had made. I told her about the aftermath. And do you know what she said? She said, "How do you feel?" I think I answered her honestly for the first time in our entire relationship.
I
Said, I feel free. I feel terrified. I feel guilty. I feel relieved. I feel angry. I feel sad. I feel like I just made the biggest mistake of my life, and I also feel like I just made the best decision I have ever made. Those can both be true, she said. Those are both true. Over the next few weeks, I discovered things that made everything click into place. I discovered that my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their house. I discovered that they were not, in fact, struggling financially in the way they had implied. I discovered that they had simply gotten used to me being their financial safety net. I discovered that my mother had been telling her friends at church that I was the ungrateful one, the selfish one, the one who had turned her back on her family because I was too arrogant to appreciate what they had done for me. I never got an apology. Not from my mother, not from my father, not from Marcus or Lauren. What I got instead was silence. Complete, absolute silence. It has been 3 years now. I haven't spoken to my mother since that night. I haven't spoken to my father since that night. I saw Marcus once, at the grocery store, and we acknowledged each other with awkward nods. I haven't seen Lauren since that night, though I know from my therapy that I eventually want to have a relationship with her. I know that she was young, that she was influenced by my mother, that she didn't understand what was happening. But that process is going to take time. What I have instead of my family is this. I have James, who became my fiancé 3 months after that dinner, who is now my husband as of last year. I have Dr. Morrison, who helps me process the grief of losing a family that maybe never was as functional as I wanted to believe. I have friends who have become my chosen family, people who have shown me what real love looks like. And I have my work. I have my career, which has flourished since I stopped using my income to rescue my family. I got another promotion 6 months ago. I bought a house. I am building a life that is completely mine, that is completely separate from the expectations that were placed on me the moment I was born. I have also become very interested in the psychology of families, in the way that patterns of manipulation can seem normal when they happen gradually over time, in small increments. I have read every book I can find about emotional manipulation, about scapegoating, about the way that some families create roles for their members and punish them for trying to step out of those roles. I have come to understand that what happened in my family was not unique. There are millions of people out there who are in the role that I was in. There are millions of people who are being drained financially and emotionally by the people who are supposed to love them unconditionally. There are millions of people who are waiting for someone to tell them that it's okay to say no, that it's okay to choose themselves, that it's okay to let go of the expectation that they can fix their families through sacrifice and hard work and loyalty. This is why I started All of Revenge Stories. This is why I am telling you this story now. This is why I need you to understand that if you are in a situation where someone is using you, if you are in a situation where love has become conditional, if you are in a situation where you're being expected to sacrifice your own future for someone else's present, you have the right to say no. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to choose yourself. The truth that I have come to understand in the 3 years since that dinner is this. My family did not fail me because they didn't love me. They failed me because they loved me conditionally. They loved the version of me that was useful to them. They loved the version of me that showed up and helped and fixed and sacrificed. They did not love the version of me that said no. They did not love the version of me that chose herself. And in the end, the person who had to love me unconditionally was me. That is the real story. That is the real revenge. That is the real triumph. Not walking out of a restaurant. Not refusing to pay a bill. But finally understanding that I was worth it. I was worth choosing. I was worth more than the role I had been assigned. I was worth my own love. And if you are listening to this right now, if you have made it this far into my story, I want you to know something. You are worth it too. Whatever situation you are in, whatever sacrifice you are making, whatever love you are trying to earn from people who have already decided that you are not worthy of their unconditional love, I want you to know that you are wrong about one thing. You are wrong about your worth. You are absolutely, completely, 100% wrong about your worth. You are worthy. You are deserving. And you have the right to say no. Thank you for listening to All of Revenge Stories. If this story resonated with you, if you have your own story of standing up for yourself, I would absolutely love to hear from you in the comments below. Share your story. Tell me where you're listening from. Let me know what you thought about what happened that night at the Verdant Room. And most importantly, please subscribe to Olive Revenge Stories. My mother said I would never build an audience, that stories like this don't matter, that people don't care about the inner workings of dysfunctional families. Help me prove her wrong. Help me show her that these stories do matter, that they deserve to be heard, that the people telling them deserve to be believed and supported and celebrated. Subscribe to Olive Revenge Stories, and let's continue breathing life into the stories that were never meant to stay silent.